Hello, James Lowman from the ACS. Thank you so much for joining me for the inaugural Convenience Talks vlog. Welcome. The majority of people out there will know exactly who you are, but for those who possibly don't, could you just do a brief introduction to yourself and the ACS, please?
Yeah, well, thanks very much for having me. It's good to be on. So I'm James Lowman. I'm Chief Executive of the Association of Convenience Stores. We're a trade association. There are 46,000 convenience stores in the UK, and we represent them to government on a whole range of issues that affect them. I'm trying to think back to what life was like beforehand and the stuff we used to do beforehand. But so loads of issues around environmental legislation, employment law, etc. So that's what we do. We run loads of events, loads of communication platforms, and all the rest of it. And I've been at ACS forever. I've been at ACS for 23 years now. So trying to do all those things, talking to government in particular.
You started when you were 7.
Exactly. Child labour. I was furloughed from something else. Furloughed for my paper round and taken away ACS.
Well, anyway, thank you so much for your time, James. The whole point of Convenience Talks is that we're going to speak to a different industry leader every single day. We're going to do 3 questions, 10 minutes, short and sharp, and we just want to get a feel for what's going on in your business and what you're seeing going on out there. So I want to start by saying, what's the current state of the ACS? I mean, what were the immediate effects of the coronavirus? What was the immediate impact on the ACS, what you were doing?
Yeah, I think what's really interesting was, you've got that sort of usual run of work. So, right up to, I think sort of the 12th, 13th of March is probably the time. And obviously, there's not one moment, but that's probably when it really flipped from being into something that was happening and there were a growing number of conversations about, into then just being like all-consuming dominant thing that no one was talking about anything else. And so, right until that point, we're having lots of meetings, discussions on things like instruction deposit return scheme is really big. It's about the impacts of the living wage increase, which is taking place today, 1st of April. Okay. So, we're talking much of those things. We were planning for our summit, our conference, which would have been yesterday, 31st of March, and loads of other events and things around that and different sort of stuff. So, it was a really, really busy time. We already had a very busy start to the year. And then what's we've really found is it's just flipped into being, I'd say this week 95% of our work is still focused on coronavirus. I think last week, week before, it was 100%. Just slightly, it's starting to have some conversations about the slightly longer term and about other issues and so on. But yeah, basically just flipped into, and that really what that meant in practice was, what do members need from us now in terms of resources and support that they can use practically day to day, and also trying to find out as much of what our members are experiencing, because then we were on calls, and still are on calls, with DEFRA and other government departments kind of every day. I mean, well, multiple times a day. So trying to get as much information from what's going on, what they need. And what's quite interesting, I mean, it's quite good in a way. I mean, it's hard to say anything's good around this, but all the conversations in government flip to be incredibly immediate. And normally with the government, you go onto these consultation processes which take literally designed to take months and pan out over years sometimes, where you're trying to devise policy. And it just went to being, there's an immediate problem, there's a conversation, and then something got dealt with in government, and it was solved overnight, or it wasn't solved. But everything went to this very, very immediate timescale. So a very different way of working immediately. And that was probably that first phase, all the stockpiling and everything else going on. And I think we've now moved into another phase, and we'll probably move into several more, some of which I might be able to speculate on, some of which I've got no idea.
Thank you very much. So the ACS obviously at the forefront of this. I think what's fantastic is that the British public are suddenly realising out of nowhere that convenience stores are the lifeblood of our community, and that alongside pubs, that is the heart of every community, and that these are the people that are going to help get us through these challenging times. And obviously those stores have had to adapt in order to fulfill the need of the community. How has the ACS adapted because of the current situation, and those adaptations that you've made, how are they affecting your business, the ACS as a whole?
Yeah, I think I won't be able to answer that last bit until probably a few months on, really, because it's been quite long term. So one of the things that we're saying to our members, and I suppose it applies to us, but obviously it's not about us, but is that people will remember how businesses and organisations behave at this time. People, there's a sort of, whatever you do, and people make judgments on companies all the time, but it's going to be times 10, times 50 in terms of the value they place on that. So really, all of our focus is on what can we practically do to help members? How do we respond really quickly? How do we take questions through very, very quickly to government or wherever else we might need to help to answer them? If in doubt whether something needs communicating, communicate it. I want people to be sick of seeing our stuff on Twitter. And so particularly some of those things I'm hoping people are sick of now is around, we produce very quickly guidance on delivery. So to say to retailers, if you might now, it's 12% of retailers already offered some sort of delivery service.
Did they, right?
So that's in normal times, that had been growing, but normally, it was a little bit of delivery to some particularly vulnerable groups, which is great. But we recognised really from before that pinch point, well, I'm sure everyone will agree that was a pinch point, but before that sort of Thursday, Friday, 12th, 13th of March, where it really sort of exploded to a different level. But before then, we thought, hang on a sec, delivery is going to be a real factor for us. More retailers are going to want to be doing deliveries. And actually, we've heard from various government calls and so on that the mainstream delivery services didn't have a lot more capacity in them. They only had so many warehouses, they only had so many vehicles. They weren't just suddenly going to be able to quadruple the amount of stuff they could deliver to people's homes. And obviously, that's what we've seen, and they're doing a great job. I'm not knocking anyone in this, but they're obviously constrained in how much they can expand what they do. So we saw, well, this is going to be a thing. Where's the capacity going to come from? It's actually going to come from companies that don't currently do home delivery, but they might be able to do that. And particularly because, and you start to see it yourself, your street's really got a WhatsApp group and stuff. I mean, ours is awful, horrible, but nonetheless, it has got some useful things there about people saying, oh, how can we help each other get shopping and this sort of thing. And these sort of very informal volunteer groups starts up, as well as more formal groups through local authorities. So that whole delivery area, how do we help members do delivery? So it's a real celebration when I see on Twitter someone using one of our posters about delivery or using the guidance stuff. I say, yes, it's actually worth doing. And then I post lots and lots of other advice. But I suppose the next big wave of stuff was around social distancing. So it's probably about 10 days ago when we started to get into that. And just actually a day or two before the Prime Minister's formal announcement, it was clear it was coming. Just did some very simple posters saying, stay 2 meters apart. Really, it's not much more complicated than that. But that's been really, really well used as well. So a lot of it's just been producing those materials, pushing them out, and also I suppose talking in the media where there are issues that come up. And so over the last few days, I've been Mr. Easter Egg, which has been extraordinary. Just got a call from members back in the last week saying we've had EHOs coming into stores, and I've heard from some other retailers, actually not convenience retailers, that they had police coming into stores, going through baskets and saying you can buy that, you can't buy that, which is total nonsense. It doesn't exist at all. So we put out a comment on it, and then all of a sudden it massively exploded over the weekend, and then into early parts of this week. To the front page of the Daily Star yesterday, and the Mail, and so anyway, it's everywhere talking about each other. Which, aside from everything else, what was really good about that is we didn't just put out a comment saying no, of course you can sell what you want, because we've got this primary authority scheme we've been running for years with Surrey and Bucks Trading Standards to basically give advice that every retailer can follow and rely on. So we're able to speak to them, get an official statement out from them that everyone could rely on. And so we're able to, as well as all the media stuff, we're able to provide that definitive advice to say, basically, you can sell whatever you'd normally sell, which is really important. A lot of retailers are getting quite panicky about this. So that's probably, I don't know, I'm not sure, there's probably not much of a system or a structure to it, but those are some of the big things we've been involved in.
Okay, thank you. And then I want to finish, trying to keep these chats short and sweet and keep people engaged and make sure they're informative, which so far they have been, absolutely. What does the future look like for the ACS? It's an almost impossible question for me to ask and for you to answer, but what's the new normal? What do you think will change because of this situation for the ACS and what they do and how they do it?
So you mentioned right at the beginning about that sort of crucial community service, and I think that, people know that anyway. It's not a new thing to people recognise that their convenience stores play an important role, but it brings it home. It really brings it home. So I think our sector will become more relevant. I think it's becoming more relevant over years anyway, but I think we'll become more relevant to the government, become more relevant to communities, more relevant to the media. So I think we'll get busier and probably many more positive things talking about our issues and talking about the things that our members are doing. So I think that'll be really, really sort of positive. as far as we've been talking about, what happens with our members. Some might really struggle coming out of this. The suppliers into our sector will have a whole bunch of different experiences. Obviously, they're keeping up with radically changing demand and so on. So I think the sector will look a bit different. You'll have some people doing a bit better maybe coming out of this, some people doing a bit worse. But it comes back to this fundamental thing. You just got to keep trying to provide things that are relevant into the sector. And so I just obviously we do have very specific plans at various times. We write them out and have charts and all the rest of it. But the fundamental is, if you're doing stuff that's relevant to your members, if you're helping them practically, if you're speaking for them effectively to government, and if governments are listening, then you're relevant. And so we just got to, just like our members are more relevant to their communities, we just got to make sure we're more relevant to our community of retailers. And hopefully, I'm certain we'll look back and say, why did we do that? That was a terrible thing to do. It was a real mistake. We'll definitely have made mistakes during this.
That's a wonderful thing.
But it's, but we'll look back and think of mistakes, but hopefully we'll look back and think, look, this is a more, we've probably illustrated our relevance a bit more and try and get a bit more, more engagement from retailers, more things that we can help them with. And, there will be a settle down into probably a bit more of a government thinking about some of those policy priorities. And hopefully they'll even more so look at it and say, well, actually, if we're looking at policy here that might be a challenge for these local shops, you've got to be very careful about that, because we've seen how much we rely on these local shops. So we've got to do things which are going to be helpful to that community of businesses and keep them sustainable and operating efficiently and without undue regulatory burden. So hopefully that will be more the conversation we're having into the future. The one thing I'd say as well, though, is we talk about different phases of this. I mean, this is going to be a factor in our lives for another year, almost certainly. Now, I'm not a medical expert, and it probably links mainly to when we can find a vaccine, which obviously I'm desperately hoping that that's sooner rather than later, but that's likely to be quite a long period of time. So we may go into a period of more normal, but then there'll probably be some more restrictions into next winter. And maybe around this time, hopefully, we're sort of coming out of it on a reasonably permanent basis, but I don't know. But so, yes, we're thinking about what happens after this, but there's also a long-term plan for tackling coronavirus and what our sector does, how we set ourselves up, how we learn from this last few weeks to make sure that if we go into another really serious period of lockdown and restrictions and, all the issues we've had in the supply chain and consumer behaviour, that just we're as well prepared for that as we can be for next winter, because, sadly, this is not going to be something in which, we come out of lockdown and then, we sort of forget about it. It's going to be a factor for a long period of our lives.
Mm. Thank you very much, James Lowman from the ACS. Really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us.
Pleasure.